So imagine you're staring at an English sentence. You're looking at it on page or maybe on a screen.
Right.
You know every single word. Like the grammar makes perfect sense in your head. You have the vocabulary totally locked down. But then a native speaker says that exact sentence out loud, and it sounds like a completely different language.
Yet it hits your ear as this incomprehensible blur of noise,
Exactly. And you haven't forgotten your vocabulary. You haven't, suddenly lost your grasp of grammar. You've completely missed the music.
which is universally the most demoralizing moment for anyone trying to navigate a new language, or even just trying to understand a heavy dialect.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that sheer panic where you think, like, did they just invent new vocabulary on the spot? Because I know what those letters look like, but the acoustic wave that just hit my eardrum does not match the data in my brain at all.
It makes me realize how many years I wasted just, reciting vocabulary lists when I really should have been listening to the rhythm. So, for today's deep dive, we are entirely dedicated to decoding the physics, the neuroscience, and the literal anatomy of why that disconnect happens.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
We are moving completely past textbook grammar. Instead, we're going to dissect why English sounds the way it does. We'll focus on the mechanics of strong and weak words, and then introduce a powerful technique called shadowing to help you sound, well, less like a robot and more natural.
I love this because taking the focus off of rigid written data, the orthographic side of things, and moving into the actual physics of human speech, it's just a crucial paradigm shift.
Right.
Because when we communicate in real time, we are not transmitting written words. We're transmitting acoustic signals. And understanding how the brain parses those signals, it changes everything about how you approach language.
I really want to start right there with this idea of the acoustic signal versus the written word. Because I have always thought of language as basically a math equation.
A lot of people do.
Right. You just plug the right vocabulary into the right grammatical formula, you pronounce the words clearly, and boom, you have successfully communicated.
Yeah. If only it were that easy.
But discovering that the rhythm, the literal beat and timing of the sounds is what actually carries the meaning to the listener's brain, that is a total reframing of how human beings interact. It's like playing a piano. If you just play the right notes but completely ignore the timing and the beat, it doesn't sound like the song at all. It just sounds like noise.
That is a perfect analogy. And let's unpack the cognitive science behind that realization. When you read a sentence on a page, what do you see between every single word?
Spaces, just white space.
Right. The spaces tell your visual cortex where one concept ends and the next one begins. It's an artificial separation created by the invention of writing. But if you look at a spectrogram, which is, a visual representation of an audio recording of natural spoken English, there are almost no spaces.
Wow, really?
Yeah. The visual gaps do not exist in the sound wave. It is just a continuous, unbroken stream of noise.
Wait, so when a native speaker is talking, they aren't actually putting spaces between their words? It just feels like they are to the listener.
Exactly. It's the illusion of fluency. Your brain's auditory cortex is performing this real-time, highly complex parsing of that continuous sound wave. It's listening for specific rhythmic cues,
Like what kind of cues?
like spikes in volume, changes in pitch, variations in duration. It uses those to figure out where to chop that continuous noise into distinct words.
Yeah.
And it does this entirely subconsciously.
Okay, wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. You're saying that if I say the phrase, I want to go to the store, my mouth does not stop making sound between want and to or go and to.
Okay.
I'm just making one long, varying noise.
Put your hand on your throat and say it. Just feel the vibration of your vocal cords. Say, I want to go to the store.
Okay, let me try. I want to go to the store. Oh, wow. Yeah, the vibration never really stops. It changes texture, I guess, but it doesn't turn off and on.
And that continuous vibration is why the rhythm is so critical. If your brain is relying on pauses to separate words, and the speaker doesn't give you any pauses, your brain's parsing engine basically crashes.
Ah, so that's the blur of noise.
Exactly, that's the blur you described in the beginning. The native speaker's brain uses the rhythm, the musical beat of the language, to slice the sound wave into words. If you don't know the music, you literally can't carve up the sound.
Which explains why perfect grammar and perfect dictionary pronunciation can actually, it can actually hinder communication.
It absolutely can.
Because if I pronounce every single word perfectly with a little space between them, like, I want to go to the store, I am giving the listener's brain data it just isn't expecting.
Yes, you are forcing their brain to process the language consciously rather than subconsciously. You sound robotic, because robots, historically, didn't have the programming to replicate the natural ebb and flow of human speech.
Right, they just played audio files of individual words in a row.
Exactly. A robot gives you perfect data, but a human gives you a beat.
A human gives you a beat. I love that. But wait, if I get the grammar perfectly right, shouldn't that be enough to be understood? Like, won't they eventually figure it out?
They might, but it requires a lot of cognitive effort on their part. Perfect grammar spoken without the correct rhythm is exhausting to listen to. The rhythm is the difference between mechanical output and natural human connection.
Okay, so if English has this musical beat, how exactly is that beat created? Because it didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's clearly highly structured, even if we do it unconsciously.
To understand the structure of the English beat, we have to look at a concept called isochrony, which is essentially the rhythmic division of time in speech. Languages generally fall into two major rhythmic categories. They're either syllable-timed or stress-timed.
And I'm assuming English is stress-timed based on everything we're talking about.
It is the absolute poster child for a stress-time language. But let's look at syllable-time languages first, just to understand the contrast.
Okay.
Think of Spanish, French, or Japanese. In a syllable-time language, every single syllable gets roughly the exact same amount of time and energy. It's like a machine gun. Ta-ta-ta-ta.
So if I'm speaking Spanish, the physical time it takes for me to say a highly important word and a totally unimportant grammar word is the same.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
The rhythm is driven by the sheer number of syllables. But English evolved entirely differently. English is a stress-timed language. This means the rhythm is not determined by the number of syllables, but by the number of stressed syllables.
Wait, so the time between the heavy beats stays equal regardless of how many weak words are crammed between them?
That's it, exactly. Let's use a classic linguistic thought experiment. Imagine a metronome. Tick, tick, tick. Now, say the sentence, dogs chase cats. Try to hit the words right on the beat.
Okay, let me feel the beat. Dogs, chase, cats. That's 3 beats. 3 strong words.
Perfect. Now, keep that exact same tempo in your head, but change the sentence to, the dogs will chase the cats.
Okay, the dogs will chase the cats. Oh, wow. I feel what happened there. Because I had to hit dogs, chase, and cats on the same metronome clicks, I had to physically rush through the will and I had to say them twice as fast to stay on the beat.
Make a step further. Keep the beat. The dogs will have been chasing the cats.
Oh, man. Okay. The dogs will have been chasing the cats. Wow, got entirely crushed. It became this microscopic little flutter of sound just so I could land on chasing at the right time.
It's a massive physical compromise. The mouth is literally sacrificing the clarity of the weak words in order to maintain the timing of the strong words. That is the fundamental physics of the English rhythm.
This makes so much sense in my own frustration. If you approach English with a syllable-timed brain, like say you're a native Spanish speaker, your auditory cortex expects every syllable to be distinct and equally spaced. But the English speaker is cramming 4 syllables into a fraction of a second just to stay on their internal metronome. No wonder it sounds like a blur. The acoustic data is literally being compressed.
And that compression is where we get into the mechanics of strong versus weak words. We have to ask, how does the brain instinctively know which words get to be the strong anchor points and which words get compressed into the valleys between them?
Yeah, because if I compress the wrong words, the whole system breaks down, right? Like if I compress the noun and emphasize the preposition, the listener's parsing algorithm is going to totally fail. So what dictates the weight?
It really comes down to cognitive load and information theory. The heavy, strong words are the ones carrying the actual semantic data, the meaning. In English, we categorize these as content words, so that's nouns, main verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. And numbers usually fall into this category as well.
Right, because if you strip away everything else in a sentence, those are the words you actually need to survive. Like if I'm in an emergency and it's super loud outside, I don't need you to hear the prepositions. I need you to hear fire, run, fast.
Exactly. That's the evolutionary logic of it. The brain prioritizes semantic anchors in a noisy environment. The nouns give you the objects, the verbs give you the action, the adjectives give you the description. They carry the burden of the message, so they get the physiological resources. They get the breath from the lungs, the tension in the vocal cords, the volume, and the time.
Okay, but I want to push back on this categorization just slightly, playing devil's advocate for the grammar purists out there.
Bring it on.
Because I can hear someone saying, but aren't pronouns incredibly important? If I say, he hit me versus I hit him, The pronouns completely change the reality of the situation. Why aren't they strong words?
It's a really vital distinction to make. While pronouns are grammatically crucial in the natural flow of continuous conversation, context almost always supplies the pronoun. Well, if we're having a 10-minute conversation about your brother, the word he is already established in our shared cognitive space. I don't need to stress it every time I reference him. The new information, what he actually did, is the verb. So the verb gets the stress. The only time you stress a pronoun is when you need to create a deliberate contrast like, no, I hit him.
Oh, which actually proves the rule. The moment the pronoun becomes the most vital piece of new contrastive data, it steals the metronome beat. It becomes the peak.
Precisely. And this peak and valley structure is what creates the physical balance of the language. You cannot have a rhythm consisting only of peaks. If every word in your sentence is a strong word, you aren't speaking with rhythm. You're just shouting isolated concepts.
Right.
The weak words, the pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, they provide the necessary acoustic valleys so that the strong words can stand out as peaks.
A valley for the peak. I like that.
Yeah.
So if the strong words carry all the meaning, what exactly are the weak words doing? Why do we even have words like in or to if we just shrink them down?
They're the connective tissue. The contrast between the heavy meaning words and the light connecting words is exactly what creates that bouncing rhythm.
Let's look at the actual physics of that valley, because it's one thing to say a word is weak or compressed, but what is literally happening inside the human mouth when we compress a word? We aren't just saying it quieter, are we?
No, we are radically altering its physical shape. And this brings us to what is arguably the most important yet least understood phonetic reality of the English language. The schwa.
The schwa. Okay, the upside-down E in the dictionary pronunciation guide. I remember seeing that symbol and just assuming it meant, like, make a weird grunting noise.
It's a bit more sophisticated than a grunt, but you aren't entirely wrong about the physics of it. The schwa, it sounds roughly like, But to understand why it exists, we have to look at the anatomy of the vocal tract.
Let's do it. What's happening in my mouth when I'm forced to compress a weak word between two strong beats?
Let's take the most notorious weak word in the English language. The preposition to, spelled T-O. If you say that word slowly and clearly, in isolation, what is your mouth doing? Say, to.
Two. Okay, my lips are pushing forward, they're rounding into a tight circle, the back of my tongue is lifting up toward the roof of my mouth, and my vocal cords feel tight, like it requires deliberate muscular effort.
It takes muscular effort, and more importantly, it takes physical time to move your articulators, your lips, tongue, and jaw into that specific position. Now remember the metronome. You have a fraction of a second to get from the strong verb want to the strong verb learn. You do not have the physical time to round your lips and raise the back of your tongue for the ooh sound in to.
So the body just gives out, it takes a shortcut.
The body is exceptionally efficient. Instead of moving all those muscles, the vocal tract relaxes completely. The jaw drops slightly, the lips remain neutral, and the tongue rests flat, right in the middle of the mouth. It is the absolute zero-effort position of the human vocal tract. If you just relax your mouth and activate your vocal cords, the sound that comes out is the schwa.
So two becomes toe.
Exactly. And we can take it even further into the physics of articulation. Let's look at the consonant in that word, the T. When you say a strong, clear T, you are building up air pressure behind your tongue on the alveolar ridge, that hard bump right behind your top teeth, and then you release it with a burst. T.
Right. It feels like a little explosion.
T, that explosion, halts the continuous flow of air. It breaks the acoustic wave. But in connected speech, when a T is trapped between two vowels, sounds like in the phrase, I want to go, stopping the airflow ruins the efficiency. So instead of a hard stop, the tongue just does a quick microscopic flick against the roof of the mouth. It doesn't stop the air, it just briefly interrupts it. This is called an alveolar tap or a flap T.
So instead of I want to go with a hard T and a rounded O, my tongue flicks the roof of my mouth and rests in the neutral position while the air keeps flowing. I want to go.
Yes, wanna is not slang. It's not poor grammar. It is the inevitable physical result of acoustic efficiency in a stress-timed language. You are prioritizing the continuous flow of the rhythm over the orthographic purity of the spelling.
That is a massive distinction. We are totally taught that saying wanna or gonna or hafta is lazy or uneducated. But you're saying it's a biological requirement to maintain the musical timing of the language. We are literally being lazy with the weak words to save time so we can hit the strong words on the beat.
Linguistic economy is not laziness. It's highly evolved optimization. If you try to force the hard T and the rounded O in a fast-paced conversation, you will stutter, you will lose the rhythm, and the native speaker's brain will struggle to parse your sentence because you're disrupting the expected metronome.
Let's run a few more examples of this squish because I want the listener to really feel the physical difference in their own mouth. If we take the sentence, I like to watch movies. The slow, robotic, textbook way is I like to watch movies.
Right, where every word gets a muscular contraction. Now apply the stress-timed rhythm. Like is a verb, watch is a verb, movies is a noun. Those are your peaks. I and to are your valleys. Relax your vocal tract entirely for the valleys.
Okay, let me try. I like to watch movies. Wow. The two just disappears into a tiny flick of the tongue and a relaxed breath.
Try a harder one. I need to practice every day.
Okay, robotic is I need to practice every day. Natural, with the schwa and the alveolar tap, would be I need to practice every day. Yeah, the two is completely swallowed. It just becomes a tiny little bridge between need and practice.
Which brings us to the agonizing reality for the learner. You study your textbooks. You memorize the flashcards. You know that TO is pronounced to. You know that AND is pronounced and. But you step out into the real world, and the native speaker's mouth is fundamentally altering those words to fit a rhythm you were never taught.
You're listening for sounds that physically are no longer even being produced.
Exactly. You're failing to understand because you're expecting the acoustic wave to match the spelling. And in English, spelling is a historical artifact. It tells you how a word was pronounced 600 years ago, not how the vocal tract optimizes it today.
So just reading words on a page is never going to prepare you for the biological reality of connected speech. The words warp, they bend, they change shape completely.
Which leads us to a critical junction. If the problem is physical, the physical changing of words to fit a rhythmic metronome, the solution cannot be intellectual. You cannot solve a physical articulation problem by studying more grammar rules. We need a physical method to train our bodies to produce this rhythm.
And that brings us to the core technique that changes everything: shadowing. This is the ultimate tool for reprogramming your auditory cortex and your motor cortex simultaneously. So let's break down the mechanics of shadowing. What is it, literally?
Shadowing is the act of listening to a native speaker and repeating what they're saying in real time, following their voice like a shadow. You don't wait for them to finish the sentence. You speak along with them, either simultaneously or with a delay of just a fraction of a second.
That is drastically different from the traditional repetition we all did in language class. You know, the old way is the teacher says, repeat after me, where is the library? Then there's a 5-second silence. Then the class says in unison, where is the library?
And that old method is deeply flawed neurologically. When the teacher stops speaking, the acoustic signal ends. In that 5-second silence, your brain has time to access your short-term memory, translate the concept back into your native language, analyze the grammar, reconstruct the sentence in English orthography, and then read the mental text out loud.
Oh, you revert to the data. You go back to reading the invisible text in your head.
Exactly. You're activating the prefrontal cortex, the analytical problem-solving part of your brain.
Yeah.
But fluent speech does not happen in the prefrontal cortex. It happens in the motor cortex, and it relies on procedural memory.
Procedural memory.
Well,
That's like muscle memory, right? Like riding a bike or typing on a keyboard. You don't think about where the K key is. Your finger just automatically goes there.
Yes, and shadowing forces your brain to build procedural memory for language. Because you're speaking almost simultaneously with the audio source, you do not have time to analyze the grammar. You don't have time to visualize the spelling. You're forcing a direct neurological link between the sound waves hitting your ear and the motor commands sent to your tongue and lips.
I was trying to find a relatable analogy for this, and the closest thing I can think of is lip-syncing a song in the mirror, or like learning a dance choreography by dancing right behind the instructor.
That's a great way to think about it.
Because if you're lip-syncing to your favorite singer, you aren't reciting the lyrics like a dead poem. You're trying to inhabit their physical performance. You mimic their breath, their pauses, the exact emotional strain in their voice. Shadowing feels like linguistic lip-syncing.
It's a phenomenal analogy because it highlights a crucial neurological mechanism called the motor theory of speech perception. This theory suggests that we perceive spoken words not just by analyzing the sound frequencies in our auditory cortex, but by subconsciously simulating the physical mouth movements required to make those sounds.
Wait. Are you saying that when I listen to someone speak, my brain is secretly firing the muscles in my own mouth to figure out what they're saying?
It is a widely researched phenomenon involving mirror neurons. When you hear a P sound, the part of your motor cortex that controls your lips lights up, even if you are totally silent. You understand the sound, partly by physically mapping it onto your own body.
That is mind-blowing. So listening is not a passive receiving act, it's a simulated physical act.
Which is why shadowing is so intensely effective. It takes that subconscious physical simulation and makes it conscious and active. You are training your articulators to ride the acoustic wave of the native speaker. You're explicitly told, don't focus on the words, focus on the melody, focus on the rises and falls. If you don't know the vocabulary, it doesn't matter. Just hum the rhythm.
And this brings up a massive psychological barrier that I think a lot of people face. When you try to mimic the rhythm and the squish of native speech, when you try to swallow the T and use the schwa, it can feel incredibly silly. It feels like you're mocking the language or acting. You feel like a fraud.
Oh, absolutely. That is the analytical brain fighting for control. It wants the safety of the textbook. It wants the certainty of TO means too. When you shadow, you have to surrender that control. You have to embrace the physical sensation of the sound, even if it feels exaggerated or incorrect to your visual brain.
But there's a psychological comfort in simply focusing on the physical feeling rather than the intellectual accuracy. When you shadow, making a mistake isn't a failure of knowledge, it's just a misstep in the choreography. You completely bypass the anxiety of grammar tests. It's purely about flow.
Exactly. Making mistakes is completely okay. But because it's a physical exercise, you can't just jump into the deep end. You wouldn't try to shadow an auctioneer or a high-speed political debate on day one. Your articulators need a progression of practice to build the muscle memory for that peak and valley rhythm.
Let's actually walk through what that progression looks like because the structure of the practice is vital to making it work. You have to start by establishing the absolute core metronome beat before you can start throwing weak words into the valleys.
Right. You start with the shortest, most condensed form of a sentence. 3 words, usually consisting entirely of strong content words. Noun, verb, noun, or pronoun, verb, noun.
Things like, I like coffee, I want water, I speak English.
Why start there? Because you have to train your diaphragm and your vocal cords to hit those peaks with deliberate force. You need to physically feel the spike in energy on the verbs and nouns. Boom, boom. I like coffee.
You're laying the foundation. It feels heavy and deliberate. Once you have that solid, heavy beat established, that's when you introduce the offbeat. You introduce the weak words that require the schwa and the squish.
Right. You take the mastered beat, I like coffee, and you force a weak word into the valley without slowing down the metronome. I like to drink coffee.
I want water becomes I want to drink water.
And notice what happens to your mouth. You hit want hard, your vocal tract instantly relaxes into the schwa for t, and then you tense back up for drink. Tense, relax, tense, peak, valley, peak.
It feels like an athletic drill. But drilling isolated sentences is one thing. Real conversation is a continuous flow. How do we bridge the gap between a single sentence and a full dialogue?
You expand the shadowing to a continuous paragraph. This is where the true test of procedural memory happens. Let's do a live analysis of this. I'm going to read a short, simple paragraph about a morning routine. I want you to try to shadow me, but first I want you to do it the wrong way. I want you to wait for me to finish the sentence and then repeat it back from your memory.
Okay, I'm going to access my short-term memory and read the invisible text in my head. Let's do it.
I wake up in the morning.
I wake up in the morning.
Stop. Analyze what just happened in your brain during that pause.
Okay. While you were talking, I was identifying the words. I saw the words wake up in the no piece, morning. I held them in my head. Then when you stopped, I accessed that list of words, applied my own pronunciation rules to them, and read them out loud.
You entirely discarded my acoustic wave. You deleted my rhythm and superimposed your own. You didn't shadow, you translated data. Now let's do it the right way. Do not wait for me to finish. Speak almost simultaneously, riding on the echo of my voice. Don't think about the spelling, just ride the acoustic wave. Ready?
I'm ready. I'm going to try to completely turn off my analytical brain.
I wake up in the morning.
Wake up in the morning.
I drink some water.
Drink some water.
I eat breakfast.
Eat breakfast.
Then I start my day.
Start my day.
How did that feel physically compared to the first time?
It was incredibly demanding, but in a totally different way. I felt a sense of panic at first because my brain was screaming, wait, you haven't processed the grammar yet. But because I was forced to keep moving, I just had to trust my mouth to mimic the sounds. I found myself naturally rushing through just so I could hit morning at the same time you did. I swallowed the weak words without even trying to, just because the speed required it.
That is the magic of the cognitive lag. By maintaining that immediacy following just a fraction of a second behind you, overload the prefrontal cortex. It cannot process the data fast enough to interfere. You force the motor cortex to take over, relying entirely on the acoustic input to drive the physical output. You learn through sheer physical necessity that getting better happens one sentence at a time, one step at a time.
It's a state of flow, and I imagine that the more you do it, the more permanent that physical adaptation becomes. Eventually, when you go to speak spontaneously, your mouth just naturally defaults to the peak and valley rhythm because that is what it has physically practiced doing.
It builds permanent procedural memory. Your tongue learns the path of least resistance. It learns to seek the schwa when it doesn't have time for a full vowel. It learns to use the alveolar tap instead of a hard stop. You stop fighting the physics of the language and start riding its natural momentum.
Stop fighting the physics and start riding the momentum. That is a brilliant encapsulation of this entire paradigm. So let's zoom out and recap the massive journey we've taken today, because this fundamentally changes how anyone should approach learning to speak or understand English.
It really does.
First, we shattered the illusion of the written word. Spoken language does not have spaces. It is a continuous acoustic wave, and the brain relies on rhythm to parse that wave into meaning.
Second, we identified the specific rhythmic structure of English as a stress-timed language. Unlike syllable-timed languages, English forces the speaker to keep a consistent metronome beat on the heavy, meaning-carrying words, like the nouns, verbs, and adjectives.
Third, we explored the brutal physical reality of the valleys between those beats. To maintain the metronome, the weak connecting words must be compressed. They lose their textbook pronunciation, their vowels reduced to the zero-effort schwa, and their consonants softened to allow for continuous airflow.
And finally, we broke down the neuroscience of shadowing, a physical, real-time imitation technique that bypasses the analytical grammar loop and directly trains the motor cortex to produce the authentic acoustic wave of the language.
It takes the anxiety out of the equation. It's no longer about being grammatically perfect. It's about finding the physical groove. It completely redefines what it means to be fluent. And honestly, exploring the depths of this acoustic reality leaves me with a final thought that I want you to mull over as you go through your day.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we've spent this entire deep dive focusing on the mechanical rhythm of English to solve a linguistic puzzle. But if you zoom out even further, think about how much unspoken rhythm dictates our daily lives and our relationships in general.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we are highly attuned to the musicality of behavior.
We really are. Think about how much of our human connection, in whatever language you happen to speak, relies entirely on the music of our communication. The long, heavy pause someone takes before answering a difficult question. The frantic rush of words when someone is terrified or excited. The sudden drop in pitch when someone is sharing a secret. Or the heavy, isolated emphasis we put on a single word to show someone we truly love them.
That's so true. The words are just the vehicle. The rhythm is the emotion. The acoustic wave is where the humanity lives.
Yes. So here's my challenge to you. When you listen to someone today, a friend, a coworker, a partner, try to tune out their literal words for just a minute. Stop listening to the data. Just listen to their music. Listen to where they put their strong beats. Listen to how they rush through their weak valleys. Pay attention to the physical speed and the pauses.
See what that unspoken rhythm tells you about their internal state. You might be shocked at how much more you understand when you stop analyzing the grammar and start feeling the beat.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a fascinating exploration. Keep analyzing the physical world around you.
Until next time, take care and keep exploring the music in the noise.